Dear all, hope you're doing well. Welcome to the ninth episode of PhD PDF Scholarship Podcast.
Today, we have Dr. Payel Das, founder of PhDs of India and scientist from a well-recognized oncology research lab located in Bangalore, sharing her expertise on transitioning from academia to industry.
So now let's get to know more about Dr. Payel Das.
Hi, thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to do this podcast with you. I hope whatever I share in this podcast would be helpful to at least some of you. So I'm Payel Das. So I did my bachelor's and master's in biological sciences from Presidency University and Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, respectively. And then I went to Singapore for a short internship for 5 months, came back and then joined NCPS as a 1-year project assistant, followed by doing my PhD in Germany on cell and developmental biology. I finished my PhD in 2022, April. And after that, I continued in the same lab as a postdoctoral fellow for about 6 months before coming back to India and joining industry. So, yeah, that's pretty much my profile, academic and industry profile. Yeah.
Proper preparation is required for every start of a new endeavor, right? So how current academics or researchers can prepare themselves mentally for transitioning from this academia to industry?
Okay, sure. So the first basic thing that one needs to do as an academic, I would mostly talk with respect to PhDs, because that's where most people are at right now. People I know and people I think who would be listening to this are also PhDs and most likely postdocs. So the first thing that is important for a PhD to transition from academia to industry is to learn how to network with people. That is very important. And this networking is not like what you do during conferences that you go to when you are in a PhD or in a master's program or even during a postdoc. It's not like that. It's more about talking to industry people who have a similar profile, who have had a similar profile as you before they ventured into industry. So you should look them up on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place to find these people. You should look them up, see what they had done in their academic career and what kind of role have they switched to after their PhD or postdoc in an industry format, in an industry setting. So that's the first important thing that you need to know. So find these people, connect with them, talk to them about the kind of role or the kind of job that they are doing in their current position in an industry. How is the industry environment? What kind of goals are expected of you? Just be very frank. Most likely many people won't reply to you, but there would be some who are kind enough to reply and let you know how industry functions. Get a brief idea about it. That's the first thing you need to do. Secondly, one of the most important criterion is making an effective CV for industry, which I think PhDs don't really know about, and it is not even taught to us, to be very frank. So generally, an academic CV is very long. I mean, 3, 4, 5. I have even seen 5 pages long CV. That is not that is not acceptable in an industry setting. You should not have such a long CV. It needs to be very crisp. Like in an academic CV, you are required to explain your projects, all the projects that you have been a part of. You are required to write elaborately what you have done, what kind of like techniques that you have used. You have to mention a lot of things that you actually don't need in an industrial CV. It's more about writing the kind of projects that you have been a part of, and most importantly, focusing on the technical skills that you have. That's the most important part of any industrial CV, because that's the only thing that people will actually look at, the technical skills, and it needs to be in a place where it is visible to the eye like immediately, because most likely an industrial CV is read by an HR who does not belong to your field, who will not belong to your field. But an academic CV is usually read by professors, so who are like kind of already know what they are looking at, what they are reading. But an HR would not know that. An HR just sees if the job description, whatever techniques are mentioned in the job description, matches your CV. And I think most PhDs don't know how to curate their CV in this format. And that's the first thing. These are the two first things that you need to learn if you want to transition to industry. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was quite insightful. And moving on to the next part, like as you mentioned, networking is a vital element. Like when you want to switch from academia to industry. So when you look at the collaborative dynamics between academia and industry, how does the collaborative environment in the industry differ to that in an academia?
That's actually a relevant question, a good question also. The first thing is that in academia, particularly in India, there is not much collaboration, except in the biggest of the like the finest institutes. There is very little to like no scope for collaboration in like state universities and other stuff. So people generally don't know how to really collaborate for a project or for anything for that matter. But in an industry, it is the bread and butter. The collaboration is a bread and butter. You not only collaborate with, you anyway have a team that you work with. You never work individually. PhD is a very individualistic approach. But in an industry, a project is never your own. You might lead the project, but you will have an entire set of team who would be helping you. The people you are expected to delegate your work to, explain them what the project is, and move along with them. You are not doing anything alone. So it's not just your department that you work with, it's also cross-functional teams. And there are teams from, finance and quality assurance and a lot of other places like intellectual property management and stuff like that, because I work in an R&D. So these come into picture. So my company makes drugs. So if you are making drugs, there's a lot of there's the component of novelty. Anything that you generate is a novel something, and that data needs to be protected. So you have to coordinate with the intellectual property management people. You have to interact with the quality assurance people just to see that everything is done in the right way. For if you want to file a patent later, something that is not very common in an academic setting. Yes, there are labs or institutes where you have product-based research, where you are generating or building some products which will eventually lead to a patent maybe, or it will be handed over to an industry for expansion. But how many labs kind of that kind of environment, how many are there? It's very limited, at least in India, as opposed to what is there in abroad. So that's very key in an industry, that you have to have everybody on the same page. And these people, there are people who do not even belong to your field. And finance or quality assurance is something that you are not an expert in if you are not from that background. So, but you are expected to collaborate with them, listen to them, hear them, what they have to say. And not just that, it is also about, collaborating, outsourcing. We don't really call it collaboration. It's more about outsourcing, but it is also collaboration. That you have to realize your limitation as well. In an industry, it is very clear what your limitations are in terms of resources, in terms of money, in terms of manpower. So that is very clear. And that this is something that you need to outsource. So now you have to talk to a very different company. It could be an Indian company, it could be somebody from abroad, and you have to work according to them as well. You have clients and stakeholders. another picture, which is like not really there in an academic setting at all. It is about you. You have a primary question. You are solving that question. You are driving the project. You are the hero or the heroine of that entire scene, which is great in one way, but it doesn't harness that kind of an environment where you have to get out of your comfort zone to learn what quality assurance is, or what exactly does an intellectual property management entail. You have to know this if you're working in an industry, like especially in an R&D. I'm just giving my company as an example here, and what I have to do. That is something very different in an industry. Of course, in academia, like there are collaborations, and when there are collaborations, you produce better results. There are better questions that you get an opportunity to answer. You yourself get a lot of opportunities if you go to some other institute or maybe abroad from India to do some kind of work, learn some new techniques, which is really great. But it is not so common in academia, at least in India, which I think holds India back in terms of research. So, I mean, it needs to be fostered more. Yeah, it is like easier said than done, because there's a lot of financial component to it as well, and where like industry is a little better, I think, as compared to academia. But yeah, the collaboration is something which is optional, or you can do, it's voluntary in academia, but in an industry you really don't have a choice. You have to interact and you have to collaborate with other people, otherwise your project is not going to go anywhere. So that's I think the difference.
Yeah, that's a lot of networking is required in industry. So that brings to a point of like the output or the expectations. So you have to be also in that sort of fast-paced manner where the requirement, the deadlines. So how do you see that part being in an industry and moving away from academia? Like, is it the pressure is drastically going to increase from researcher side, because research is something which needs time, right? Like you can't predict an output for a cause. It needs time, it needs analysis. So in academia you have that freedom of going through literatures, seeing what is done at different universities. But when you are in a fast paced industry which requires output for a competitive manner as well, so how do you view that aspect of output or expectation from an industry versus the academia?
Yeah, so academia is actually very slow. I'll say that. So slow might be a bad word here, but academia gives you a lot of scope to explore. So I think that's a better way to put it. So if you like 10 different things, you have the opportunity to actually explore 10 different things, provided you have the resources and you have the bandwidth to perform all paths. So that is possible in academia. In industry, it is never possible. You might have 10 different ideas, but you have to narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 maximum. And there are a set rules given to you that you have to answer these questions. This is the biggest problem statement, the main problem statement, and this is how you are going to approach this problem. If you have, of course, you give your own ideas that this is, I think, a faster way or a better way to like answer this question. So then it is like discussed about what are the like costs and what are the revenue and how much resources we need. That is a very big component in an industry, like the timeline it will require for that, whatever you are proposing, how much time does it require to accomplish that particular goal or to answer that particular question. In academia, you do not really have to think about it at least in your initial years. When you are just doing literature survey, you are like reading a lot of things, you are getting interested in a lot of things, and you think, okay, you start proposing this and that and start working on like 4 or 5 things together. The timeline is not a constraint there, at least for the first few years. Of course, after like the 5th year, you have to graduate if your institute has put a mandate to it. But yeah, in the initial years, you are like, in that honeymoon phase kind of like, oh, everything is fancy and I'm doing everything that I want to do. And you are not really thinking in terms of what is my net output. because in the end, you do a lot more work than what is produced. In the end, the output is much less as compared to what you do, of course, in academia. But in industry, it is already thought of. You basically backtrace. If this is how things are going to work, this is how I'm going to work. And these are the particular points that I'm going to focus on. That's it. There, and you give a particular timeline. It needs to match to the, the company goal, or the whatever the company has set it for. And that's it. You do not have room to like explore 10 different things, 20 different things. And about literature survey, we also have to do a literature survey. But in academia, you can take 5 days to read 100 papers. In industry, you have 2 days to read 100 papers. That's it. So now it is up to you so in academia, you can like actually sit and devour the paper because it is so good. Like it is so nice. It's such a breakthrough thing that you are like, oh my God, this is so nice. So I will take my time to read it, relish it, just like you have fancy food. Like when you have time, you will relish it. But if you don't have time, it doesn't matter if it is fancy, not fancy. I have to get the job done. So what do I need from this particular paper? That's all you read. You do not have time to go line by line. That is not possible. Yes, of course, you have to also critically analyze at least the results. That is still a part of the job. But you don't really have time to sit on it for a very long period of time. You have to come up with ideas and solutions and whatever you are trying to propose in a very short period of time. So that way it is very fast-paced. And there are multiple projects running at the same time, which move in very, very, very different directions in an industry. Like if you are a lead, so you have to like switch from one project to another in a matter of like hours, because you start the day with one of your projects, you're working on it, doing something, and suddenly maybe your manager comes and says, oh, this client has a meeting today at 4 p.m. Can you just prepare a presentation, which is a completely different project. Like you are not even in the zone, but you have to switch your zone. And now you have to start looking at a completely different question. It doesn't happen in academia. You might have 3-4 different questions, but they are all leading to one particular problem statement. In industry, that is very rare. At least in my field, it's very rare. So I work on 3 different projects, which are very, very different from each other. Of course, they are all oncology based. It's all an anti-cancer drug in the making. Cancer is the common factor here, but the way you are approaching the cancer, the disease itself, is very, very, very different. You are reading something and suddenly you have to switch gears, and that's can be difficult, can be overwhelming for somebody who's just shifts from academia to industry, I think. But you get used to it. There is an adrenaline rush also, because in industry, you get to know the bigger picture, the biggest picture. What is my goal? Like the company has this goal that, okay, we'll produce this drug, we will bring this drug to the market. That is your ultimate goal. So you know it and you are working towards it. So there is also an adrenaline rush component. Yes, I'm working on something really breakthrough. If this makes it, then yeah, it's a great thing.
That's a great insight because I could also resonate because my PhD was also industry relevant PhD. I was working for Tata Steel Netherlands. So they pick it up a problem and that becomes the objective of my PhD. So the initial hurdle of finding the research problem was not there. So yeah, it was quite focused in that manner. So this brings up to the point, for a person who is thinking that he should better go to an industry or to an academia. So in your perspective, or in your general perspective, what is the biggest misconception that people have about industry when they are in academia?
Okay, so I have heard this from a lot of PhDs, and I was also I also had this misconception actually, and somebody actually came and told me that you are wrong. So it's basically that you do not have transferable skills, that PhDs do not have the transferable skills that are required in industry. It's actually not true. whatever you have garnered, the knowledge that you have garnered throughout your PhD in itself is a skill. It in itself is an experience. In industry, PhDs are much more respected than any other, your peers or who do not have a PhD. Of course, if they're at the same level, they have made a reputation. Of course, there is a respect. But when you are coming as a PhD usually gets more respect. So that is one thing. And whatever transferable skill that we talk about, it's not really transferable that the industry needs. It's not something, the skill is not something that you can train people on. It's mostly about the soft skills. So it's not something that is there in a book, in an academic book that you read and you will know that this is something that I need to do in an industry. That never happens. Whatever you have learned in terms of techniques, in terms of concepts, in terms of your own subject, it's very relevant to where you are going. Because I'm assuming you will be in a similar kind of a field. It's not like a physicist now suddenly wants to go and work in a pharma company. It doesn't happen. I want to be in a biological R&D. Usually doesn't happen. Something to do with physics, or maybe it'll move to a completely different sector, which is marketing or finance or something. But the fields do not really dramatically change that way. So whatever you have learned, you just have to utilize it in an application manner. You have to think in terms of application. Even if you have done basic science research, it's more about how that basic science research translates into application and how it will eventually benefit the society. That's all what the industries are about, which is something you will intuitively know if you read. And you will read more about it. You'll see some concepts being translated, some concepts being used to make a certain drug molecule, which then drug molecule, now you know how it might behave in a human body and how it might treat a disease. That is something you anyway know, you will learn, if you just read a book. So that is not something that is not challenging for a PhD. It's very easy to pick those nuances, scientific nuances up. It's mostly about the soft skills, which cannot be trained. It's a personality trait in the end. It's about how you talk with people. As simple as that. That's a soft skill, how you talk with people. In academic setting, it's very easy to shout at someone. It's a bad thing, and I don't want to talk very negatively about academia, but this is something very common in academics. A senior just shouting at a junior, you will see that, especially in an Indian setting. So it's very common that way. In an industry, you cannot do that. Never at any point of time, no matter how angry you are, so you need to know how you talk to people, how you talk to somebody who is not ready to listen to you at all, somebody whom you need to convince. How do you convince people? How do you delegate work? In PhD, everything is on you. The onus is on you. If the project fails, it's your responsibility. In industry, it's more about how you will distribute the work effectively among your peers, among your subordinates. That is a soft skill. It is how you communicate, how you talk, how you voice your opinion is what matters. And that is not something that you learn from a book. That is something that you have to build in yourself. That I need to talk politely. So those kind of things, if there is a conflict, how do you resolve a conflict? Will you find it in a book? No. So this is something that naturally comes to people. And that is what I think sets people apart in an industry, because there is something called an HR round in an industry interview always. It can be your first round, it can be your final round, but there's an HR round where certain of these kind of questions are asked. If there's a conflict of interest between you and your subordinate, or maybe your manager themselves. So now what do you do? Now what do you do when you have a conflict with your supervisor? In a lot of cases, whatever the supervisor is saying, eventually you will be doing following his or her idea. In many cases, it might happen that the person listens to you. If the supervisor is very receptive to your ideas, they will listen to you. And if they think, yes, this is logical, this can be done, it won't require a lot of resources and all, sometimes they will allow you to. give that opportunity. They will give you that opportunity. But a lot of cases it happens that whatever your senior is telling, you have to do it. And you, whether you agree to it or not, but you have to do it because you cannot question back. That's the norm. But in an industry, if there is a conflict of interest, how do you resolve it? Like, how do you place your own opinion so that the project in the end doesn't suffer? So you have to come to a like midpoint, and that is important. It might not be relevant in an academic setting, but it is very relevant in an industry setting. And there is something called psychometric analysis that the HR does about how well you can adapt to a different environment. If you are put in one team and suddenly you are moved to a different team, will you be able to adapt in a very short period of time? That's something you are judged on. And this is not something that is written in any book, that this is not something that where you have a protocol and you just follow it. It doesn't happen like that. How you are as a person is what matters. And I think that is something you need to think about. Like, be a good PhDs make like in industry, they usually do good, because after a certain point you have learned certain things and it is imbibed in you because you went so deep into that concept. You actually put an effort to learn things, to think about it, to rationalize it, and really you just saw through that entire process. So I think it trains you well that way. Like, that is why I think PhDs are like, they are actually a very great asset for industries. Industries do not usually get PhDs. There are much less number of PhDs as compared to masters or bachelor students. So I feel that academics, that part is actually relevant. Even if it is not translational, it is relevant because it helps you learn, it helps you think. And it is very important that you have an independent thinking. And it only comes if you know your subject very, very, very deep. Whatever it is, it doesn't need to translate. Everything doesn't need to be translational, but basic sciences is important because basic science forms the foundation of application science. So I think that is important. Like, I will say one should do that. Yeah.
So it evolves the critical thinking of a person,
exactly.
Analytical thinking, right? Okay. Yeah, that's best way to put in for a good point for the academia. And when you think about industry, like, how is the job stability part? Because after completing PhD, stepping into an industry, definitely we don't want to have an unstable job. Or like, how about the work-life balance in a industry when compared to an academia?
So at least after the COVID, things have become a little dicey also because of resources and a lot of inflation happening and stuff like that. But generally, the jobs are usually stable. Like, at least in the company that I am in, like the R&D, it's a small company, but it's like the job is stable. It's not like tomorrow I will lose my job. Also, you cannot lose a job like that in an industry. Yes, now it is happening very frequently after the pandemic due to a lot of other reasons. But usually, if you're not performing well, there is something called performance improvement program. So if you're not performing well, you are put in that program. First, you're given a warning, then you are put in those programs and to see if you can improve. So there are a lot of steps where the manager steps in, the HR steps in as to what is the problem, why aren't you performing well? Something that academia doesn't really do, but industries do. So you will be asked. It's a part of labor law. You just cannot like say one day to somebody that you can like get out. You are no more required here. It doesn't really happen. Now it is happening mostly in the IT industry that yes, you just suddenly wake up one morning and you are fired. They just get to know that. But it's because of a lot of other reasons also. But in general, your job is stable in whatever you are doing. The only thing that you actually need to be really like you need to work hard on is that how much value you put on the table. You are assessed based on that. If the company loses you today, what are they losing? Whether they will lose something or it is like, okay, you are gone, somebody else will come and do the job and it will be just as fine. So So in company like Elon Musk, I think, said this. I don't like that person, but I'll at least this particular quote of his actually is very relevant, that you are paid for the brain, not for the labor. So what is the value that you put on the table? Your value comes from your brain, and PhDs do have that brain. You just need to use it. That's it. So in terms of job stability, I think that is what my take is. It's a dicey question at the moment. I don't want to say, yeah, the job is very stable or very unstable, because after the post-pandemic times are a bit unpredictable also. But generally it is like that you are not like fired just like that. There are a lot of steps that if things can get better for you, the HR steps in, and if what is going wrong, do you not feel comfortable here, and all those things come into picture. And about the work-life balance, yeah, academics don't have work-life balance, so let's not just talk about it, but industries do. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to take a leave, you can take a leave. Nobody would make faces like, oh, what is this? Nobody would judge if you're taking a leave. Your Saturdays and Sundays are usually off if you want to work. If there is some deadline or something and you think that you want to work, like I have worked on Saturdays and Sundays now also. It's on my own accord. It was not something that was forced upon me that, yes, you have to come and you have to generate the data and get it done. It's not like that. But if there is a timeline and you are the project lead and you want to get it done on time, and for some reason things have not worked over the weekday or something, and then you think that maybe I can just finish it up on one weekend and it's fine. That is up on you. It's not like the manager has asked you to come. So that is very. And if you are just working for like the fixed hours, that is also fine. Nobody, you clock in at 8 o'clock, you clock out at 5 sharp. It's okay. Nobody is going to come and say, like, why did you just go out at exact 5? Why not 5:30 or 6? Or if you have work like for out of 9 hours, if you have work for 8 hours, some days it's fine. That is also fine. Nobody just comes and tells you anything. So there is a good work-life balance. Not just that, there are a lot of activities that happen which keep the employee engaged, something that doesn't happen in academia. Like, you need to show some appreciation for people who are working hard. You need to, like, I mean, you need to give them that give them that sense that you are being seen if you are doing something good. Everybody wants that. Like in academia, you are doing a good job, the supervisor comes and says, yeah, good job, now do that. It is so like short-lived. It's not even there almost. But in industry, you are actually appreciated. If there is something that like you do, or something very relevant, then you are appreciated. Your manager tells you. Sometimes even the senior management comes and tells you, which is a big thing. The senior management comprises of, the biggest of the players in that industry. So which is a great thing. And I think people need to hear this more often. I think that keeps people motivated, which academia kind of doesn't really do. If there's a good supervisor, like good seniors or somebody, yeah, they do it. They keep people motivated, their juniors motivated, the students motivated. But in general, most of the time it doesn't happen. Like that is the concept of PhDs of India also. Like, nobody comes and asks the PhD, how are you, on a regular basis. It's more about, hey, did you publish that paper? Hey, when are you graduating? That's the question that's being asked. Like, at least ask if the person is okay. Like, I mean, why is it so difficult? That's such a basic question. I think and academia, after a certain point of time, we just forget to ask people this. And this is really sad. But in industry, if you are not doing okay and you want some time off, you just tell that I want some time off. I'm not, like, you don't have to share what your problem is. You can just say and just go. It's fine. Take your time off, and that will, like, nobody will come and bite you at the back, like, why did you go and do this? that doesn't happen. Very rarely. It might happen, I don't know. But it didn't happen to me. So yeah.
That's fair enough. But I want to touch upon as a follow-up question, because you have done your PhD from Germany, so you have got an international exposure. And Europe, I've heard a lot about European work-life culture is different compared to that of India. So if you think in that context, how is the work-life balance of a PhD outside India, of one who is doing PhD outside India and within India, differs, and what is one of the suggestions, a couple of suggestions that you think that, yeah, by doing this or by having a change in attitude, yeah, it can be implemented.
Personally, as
Yeah,
a PhD, I don't think it differs a lot.
is it?
No. People
Okay.
still work on weekends, and you are expected to work on weekends. At least the place I was in, we were expected to work on weekends, and most people worked on weekends. So it's similar. I don't think there is a difference. So I can't really give a suggestion as to what you need to do in that case, because it doesn't exist. The balance doesn't exist. And to some extent, it could be good for some people, because some people are naturally workaholic. So it doesn't really matter to them if they are working more and they do not really have a social life. But after a certain point, you do burn out. So that's something that you need to take care of. Okay, you might be workaholic, but you need to take pauses too. You need to pause, even if you don't want it, unwillingly pause. I think that is quite important. And I think that is what happens in abroad. I mean, they are also like, pushing hard, and like working over the weekends, working very long hours. But there is this component of also pausing at times. It might be very rare, but you need to pause too, which I think sometimes Indian PhDs forget to do. It's like, oh my God, if I just take a break, then everything is going to fall apart. That should not be. Like, you need to take break for yourself. It will rejuvenate you. That I think can be a suggestion, but yeah, in terms of work-life balance, it's not there, even in abroad.
I think a bit of like a contradicting idea. I think it also depends on the department you are involved with, basically, I guess, as well. Because like being from an engineering stream, like this was a different sort of opinion I've heard from people in the Europe. Like I'm in Australia, like here also it's a bit different. Like they give more sort of relaxation to cope up with the sort of stress a PhD student possible can come across. So yeah, I think it's an open-ended stuff.
It's an open-ended thing, but what I have seen from my personal experience,
Okay.
I think that academia doesn't have work-life balance. So
Okay. That's a generalized.
irrespective of the geographical area.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So yeah, and like when you step from academy to industry, see, you have done your PhD, and after that you have done your postdoc. So do you think, like a couple of students have been asking, like, is it necessary to do a postdoc to step into a industry,
Not
or
really.
is it directly from PhD to industry is possible? Or what does postdoc offers if you are going through that path to an industry?
Okay, it doesn't really offer much in terms of if you have a postdoc or not, but there are limitations to doing postdoc, I will say. Okay, so the thing is, there is a certain band that you can be in. I mean, there are, so industries have these bands, the lower band, then the middle band, then the higher band. But basically, the higher band is the senior management, the top people, the CEO, CSO, whatever. The middle is basically the directors and the executives and all those part. And the lowest is basically the trainees and research associates, people who haven't done a PhD but want to like have shifted to industry. So that kind of role. And then there is this band, the first band, which is for the PhDs and postdocs, where there's a limitation. It varies from industry to industry. So if you cross that experience level in terms of postdoc, for example, if you are a PhD with 5 years of postdoc, you do not really qualify for that scientist band at all. You are overqualified. Basically, not qualified is a wrong term, but you are overqualified and you do not get that position at all. 1 year, 2 year is fine. Now it can depend, vary between industry to industry, the number of years of postdoc that you can have. But after a certain point, you become overqualified for that position, and that is the only position where it is easier to get in. Getting a CEO position is hard, right? Like, the higher you go, the lesser are your chances of getting in any like in any sector that way. So if you want to become like a director, if you directly want to go to a director post, that post is very limited throughout the any industry you take it. Like if you want to go like interview for a director post, because you have like 12 years of postdoc. So I mean, that doesn't happen. Then you have to wait like for a very long period of time, and it's not even sure that you will get the position. Somebody like a junior director might become the director, no, from that company itself. That's also possible. That's so that is what you have to take care of. You cannot spend, if you want to move to industry, you cannot spend too many years in academia. Then at some point you have to move. And if you do not do a postdoc at all, it doesn't matter. The PhD itself counts as an experience. So there are some roles, there could be some roles where it might be mentioned that you need like 1 or 2 years of industrial experience, and then only we will take you. Then you should go find another industry where, and there the criterion is like PhD with 0 to 1 year of experience, or 0 to 2 years of experience. If it's written 0, you are good to go. You can join. But 2 years of experience only, then if you are like 3 years of postdoc, then it doesn't count anymore. You become overqualified. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's good. And now in context of like feedback and evaluation, like how the industrial feedback and evaluation differs from that of academia. So like those who have gone through PhD, they may be well aware of the peer reviewing of the journals of the work, and maybe at different levels it will be reviewed. But industry, how is it taking place, and what sort of significant difference you make out of it? And yeah, those aspects, could you share, please?
So academic peer review is mostly about work. It's mostly work related. Like you have written a paper, you have a particular question, and you have some smaller questions in order to, answer that bigger question. That's what you do. That's a structure, basic structure of a paper. And somebody from outside, a reviewer, would say that this part is not clear. You have to answer another 2 questions, smaller questions, in order to get there. And then you start working on it and get it done and do it. That entire process might take you a year also. It might be done in 2 months. It might be done in 6 months. It might take a year, more than a year, to do that. Industry, it doesn't happen like that. Yes, there are like work-related feedback. It will never be like you have to do that. That is not a feedback. Okay, in academic peer review, you have to solve this part of the question because this is not clear from your paper. Very, very like focused, that kind of. In industry, it will never be like you have to do this experiment. It will never be like that. It is more about if you have been slow, if you haven't delivered, because industry, the first thing is there is a goal setting stage where your manager basically sets goals for you that in 6 months you are supposed to achieve these kinds of goals. Every industry has it. It might vary from position to position, from project to project, whatever your project is, whatever it demands at that point of time. So there are like 6 months given to you. You have to accomplish those goals. After the 6 months, you are evaluated based on those goals. Now, those goals are not really how many experiments you conducted or how many papers you wrote, because product-based industries don't really write papers, very less. It's not very frequent as in academia. So it's more about whether you have been able to deliver things on time, whether you were on timeline. That is the feedback that you will get, that yes, you were within the timeline. You can be within the timeline, you can be behind the timeline. If you are behind the timeline, why were you behind the timeline? That is a question that is raised. Why were you behind the timeline? What did you do wrong? That kind of feedback, like what do you need to do now from now onwards to improve on that so that you actually reach your timeline? That is the thing. Like then data integrity, data reproducibility. Data integrity is about recording everything like, properly, because mine is an R&D company. The data integrity is very important because eventually you go for patent filing and, go to, if you want to market the drug, then through clinical trials, there's a lot of, again, intellectual property stuff that need to be taken care of. So data integrity, your data needs to be authentic if you have not recorded anything properly. So that is a feedback, like to do this properly. This is how you need to record your data. This is how you need to, like, write your observations, come to the conclusions. This is how you record everything. That is a feedback. If you haven't been a good manager, because if you manage subordinates, then how you can improve being a manager, what you need to work on, like why are your subordinates not performing well under you, what is going wrong. So that is more like, it is not exactly like you have to do this work or you have to do that work. It is more about how you can improve yourself or better yourself to further the company goals, which are basically the same. At one level, it is same for everybody. So depending on the department, but eventually it hits the same spot. So that's the thing. This is like, it's more about how you can do, like how you can be more careful next time when you are recording your data, or how you can utilize your time or distribute your time in a way so that you can meet the deliverables within time. So these are your deliverables. If there are too many projects, then how to maximize what needs to be done, what you should prioritize more. These are the feedback that we get usually. So very opposed to what academia is mostly about, papers, and it's very work related, that this is the thing, I don't like this. Somebody will say, this is bullshit. This is not how it is done. You need to do it in a separate way. In an industry, it never happens because it is very set. It is already said, this is the way you do it. If you don't like it, it's not about liking the way. If you know a better way, faster way, of course you can propose to the management, to whoever is responsible, to the authority, and see what they like. You have to give a rationale of why you want to choose a different method. And if they like it, they might agree to give the resources for you. And that's it. So yeah.
Can we say like this, like the upskilling margin in an industry is quite wider than that of academia?
Yeah, true.
That's because like you will be involved with a lot of people, but in terms of technical upskilling, like do you think it's like what we mentioned was mostly related to the soft skill aspects, right? Because there we come to know how we need to behave with others. But in terms of technical upskilling, uh, how far do you think it will be like industry can offer?
It actually depends mostly on projects, the kind of projects that you have. You will at some point, because some in our goal settings, there is this thing also for most people, is that you have to learn a new technique in like 6 months. Okay, so for any purpose, even if it is the smallest of the smallest new technique that you haven't been aware of, even if it is just a software that you learn, a bioinformatics tool maybe you are learning, but you need to learn that. You have to show that you are engaged in such a thing, so that, and like, because now data science and AI is so prevalent, so many people do a coursework, and it's fine if you do a coursework, if you come up with some ideas, like at least using a bioinformatic tool, especially most of the tools are already available there. Reading something called an RNA-seq data. It's a transcriptome data, like RNA profiling, which is like, not many people can do it. If you just spend some time learning it, if there is somebody already an expert, so the industry gives that opportunity. You have to be also willing to learn things. No, that's also a thing. I mean, there is always opportunity to learn in an industry, and it doesn't have to be in terms of just your kind of technical skills, like the biological technical skills. If you want to learn about management because you want to shift to management, it is very easy within the industry. Go to the management person, talk to them what they have done. You don't really need to go through an entire MBA course. You just need to know what are the basic things that they require, and it's easy that way. Like, that flexibility is there in an industry, that you can go and talk to these people, get to know what they are doing. If you want to go into marketing or something, or some other things which is not related to the kind of work you have been doing in your PhD, you want to shift gears, then talk to these people. What have they done? You don't really need to go and do an entire like 2-3 years course. So yeah, though in that way, like even in terms of your project also, there are a lot of learning opportunities that industries provide. So, just like academia also provides that.
So that brings end of our podcast with Dr. Payel. So, in this episode, we have covered key aspects of transitioning from academia to industry, including mental preparation before stepping into an industry, collaborative dynamics, productivity expectations from industry and academia, and job stability, the resume, how the resume should be framed. Compared to that of an academic application, mentorship, and the feedback process, which is quite relevant. And it's quite different when you compare with academia. So we extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Payal Das for sharing her invaluable insights and experiences. We also encourage our listeners to explore Dr. Das PhD of India forum,
Mhm.
wherein you can find further resources and insights of experience of researchers across different Indian institutions. So thank you once again, Dr. Payal Das, for being our guest for this podcast.